Hey everybody, it's Book of Katherine, and we are back for How to Beat the UN. And boy, am I going to knock your socks off today. I don't think you're even going to be ready. So I know that it's a Nazi agenda, but it's very different this time. It's very, very different, and you're about to hear why. You will be so shocked. Oh, you'll be so shocked. So I wanted to show you up close and personal. Here it is. Here it is, the piano. Thank you guys very much. So this is the gift under the tree. Just for you to me. Thank you very, very much for it. I'm very, very grateful for it. If you're on my Twitter feed, then you know what I'm talking about. So thank you very much. All right, so let's get started. How to beat the UN. And I left some of these notes underneath my page on the video for why the UN wants no borders, and I left them on the comments underneath it below. I should make a note that I said Agenda 21 was started in 1991, and it was actually signed in 1992, and I apologize for that. George H.W. Bush made 3 speeches about the New World Order in 1991. He made 3 speeches in a row, 2 of them to Congress announcing the United Nations New World Order. So I was doing a lot of research right up until that point, so I had like all these numbers in my head. I really apologize about that. You can hear in other videos, I knew it was 1992, and then we get to that video. It's just because I had so much research stacked in my head. So it is 1992 that it was actually signed, and you can see that in the stock market. Like, you can see actually the world's wealth is going along like this. The 1%'s up here, and the bottom 90% is here, and they're like oh, Agenda 21, our common futures introduced in 87. Boop! The crash of 88 happens, right? Do-do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do. The world signs Agenda 21. Boom! And then it just keeps going. Do-do-do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do. Like the bottom 90%'s wealth goes away, 1% wealth goes up. And then, all of a sudden, like Bill Clinton signs an executive order for it to be law in the U.S., boom, it goes even further, and it continues through all presidents, Bush, Obama, Clinton, all the presidents, that just keeps going. And then boom, the housing crisis happens, and it just soars, and you can just see this. And so that's what's constant. Like, they just keep going. Their agenda keeps going no matter what through all the presidents. And you can tell that. Like I always said, if there's a non-politician, I was just like, people, if there's someone who, people could tell both sides were no longer working for the people, and we find out that they weren't, and it's very, very interesting. So let's find out how we can get out. And so here are some ideas for you. So here is something to know about UN 21. So the United Nations is not a government body. Like, keep that in mind. All of their little agencies, this is how the UN works, okay? So the United Nations was formed, right? So there's this United Nations, and they meet together in New York, supposedly. New York and then Geneva. They say they meet in New York. But then they created this climate change agenda. Like, they create a climate change agenda, which is really Agenda 21 and the Nazi agenda. It's like they took ice cream, they took this ice cream and then they put a label on it that this is green beans. And so everybody's like, oh, it's good for me. I'll eat green beans, thinking that it's green beans and it's good for them. And it's not. It's ice cream. It's terrible for them. It's kind of like that. So they did the same thing with the Nazi agenda. They couldn't say, like, hey, we're doing a Nazi agenda on all you people. By the way, we're bringing Nazism back. Hello. Everyone in the world would have rejected it. Everyone would have said, like, we're out. So they had to give it a label that everyone in the world would sign up for. Because they don't rule. They don't have a government. They can't arrest you if you don't do what they say. They have to have people go along willingly and say, oh yeah, I'll vote for that. So when they put a law up on our ballot, you have to vote them in. Every single time, every election, they need us to vote for them every single year. They need us to vote for their politicians. They need us to vote for their senators. They need us to vote for their laws. They need us to vote. And then once they get in, like Obamacare is their goal number 3, someone can come in afterwards in a democracy and have it removed. And then they have to start all over again. And they know that they don't actually have any kind of authority, which is why they want to do the Migration Compact. They want to have the authority. So what they do is they introduce this climate change agreement, And what it is it's just like a label over the Nazi agenda. It's this nice, pretty label. And it says, we are climate change. Now, who's going to say no to that? We're environmentalism. We're so pretty. It's like this big, shiny ornament. And they say, we're climate change. And everyone goes, okay, we'll buy that. We'll buy that. Oh. And so what they do is they go around the world meeting in climate change meetings. And they go around the world. They go to Qatar. And they go to South Africa. And they go to Fiji. And they go to Marrakesh. And they literally meet all over the world. They've had like 28 big, huge conferences, climate change conferences. But that's just the shiny label. Inside each conference, if you actually read what's going on inside each conference, they have the Nazi platform had a 17-point or 25-point agenda. The climate change, the shiny thing, you open it up and there's 17 points and it's exactly the Nazi agenda. It's just all they say with every single agenda. They go, oh, this is no poverty. And then you open it up and you find out, oh, you're actually creating world socialism. You're getting richer. When you start going into each policy, you're like, but this just makes the rich richer. Like when you really break it down, like every single policy. For example, they want gender, one of their, I think, goal number 5 is equality. They want equality. But all of their goals focus on women. It's like we want gender equality and women empowerment. And so all the entire agenda focuses on women. Now, what's very interesting is that the, 50 countries, even these last 30 years, women empowerment's one of their things. For the last 30 years, there's still the Muslim world where a woman's word is worth 50% of a man's. No, they don't actually carry out these agendas. What they do is they use them in each country to wield it and make you feel bad to vote for them. So like they go, oh, they hate Christmas and they want Christmas to go down because it's something in culture. They want us to be a globalist society. So they go, oh, a good one to tear down Christmas is number 5. Let's go after Santa because he's male. We can use number 5, gender inequality. They actually have a campaign called Him for Her, changing everything that's him, switch it to her. And so they took Santa. They took Santa and they're like, oh, it's gender neutral. But we know from Cheryl Atkinson that all of those surveys are false. They're totally false. And they put it out in the media to make you think that's really happening. It's not happening. If it was happening, there would be gender neutral Santa dolls. No one wants Santa to be gender neutral or else they'd be selling dolls that way. Everyone likes Santa just fine as a male. But they use this thing to tear down Christmas and make people feel more miserable and tear down a cultural holiday because they want a one world community that's socialist where they just look to the UN. It's interesting. I was watching Russell Brand do an interview with Candace Owens. And he kept pushing socialism, and he was very specifically pushing the UN's form of eco-socialism. It was very sly. Everything he said was just their socialism to a T. And I was like, do you know that's Nazism? Do you have any idea? Like, do you know what you're pushing? And every time she'd say he pushed socialism, and then she pushed democracy, and he'd say, oh, I don't think that's compassion. I actually think that's just intellectual jargon. And I was like, oh, so when you push socialism, it's compassion. But when she pushes democracy, it's intellectual jargon. And he would just make statements and judgments. And you start to notice how they use the media. And then he says, I'm not a Democrat. He goes, oh, I'm not a Democrat. And you hear that from a lot of these progressives. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not with the Democratic Party. And I'm like, right, you're with the Progressive Party. And I used to think maybe this new Progressive Party is different from the progressives of old. Nope, it isn't. It's the exact same agenda. I carried it out in that last video, exact same agenda. I'm like, oh, no, you guys are exactly the same. Sterilize, get out the weak, population control, the whole 9 yards. Whole 9 yards. Certain populations are not worth hearing from. Free speech should be countered. The whole 9 yards. I was like, wow. And so Russell Brand goes out there. They all go out there and they say, I'm not with the Democratic Party. I'm like, yeah, you're with the UN world government. You see a utopia in the future. But he doesn't see that chart of the rich getting richer or the poor getting poorer. Or maybe he does, and he's enjoying writing that rich getting richer. She's like, oh, I healed myself. And he's like, I don't accept that reality. And I'm like, right, because humans can never do anything on their own. In a socialist system, it has to be the group. So if it doesn't go with him, he's just like, I don't accept that reality. And that's like straight up Nazism. Like, just like you read what the culture went through back then. And they said everything's an optical illusion in Europe. Like, everything they say isn't actually so. And everything that's so is never actually said. Europe is one big optical illusion. And I was like, it's back. Welcome. It's back. And did you know they actually have patches? Patches from back then of the Nazi symbol, wish the Ottoman Empire like a Turkish sword for Islam. They actually had Islamic soldiers for the Nazi party, that Nazism actually had Islam carrying out his tasks. And I was like, well, there you go. Thank you for that confirmation. So it's really amazing. So let's get on to how we can actually knock it. Oh, right. So there's the UN. So we've got the UN up here, right? And then the UN, what it does is it goes to all these climate change conferences. And in between them, they're negotiating. Every time you hear they're negotiating, you see all these press releases, the UN is negotiating, these countries are negotiating on climate change. They're negotiating those 17 things on their little constitution. They're negotiating your lives. They're negotiating banking. They're negotiating our land. They're negotiating our water. They're negotiating your socks. You know, they're negotiating everything. And then they come to an agreement at that climate change conference once a year. And then they hand down the agenda. And right now it's called Agenda 2030. And they hand down those 17 agenda goals that control every part of your lives, just like China controls every part of their lives. And they hand it down to all of these, to this one like institution called ICLEI. Just kind of like, you know, when Hillary Clinton had her thing and then she handed it down to a lawyer's office, and then the lawyer's office handed it off to people, and that's why they always whitewashed. There's a Simon and Puri, you know that one law office in D.C.? There's like a really big law office in D.C., and they all handed off, all the politicians hand it off to a law office first, and then the law office does all the hiring so that their hands are clean of it. So the law office is called ICLEI, and so ICLEI, which is what I outlined for you in my Clean the GOP video. So the UN hands everything to ICLEI, ICLEI whitewashes it, and then hands it to the NGOs. Now notice they are all called NGOs. That stands for non-government agency. And what's amazing is they all have labels too. They all have bright, shiny labels. They're all called like Feeding America, Bread for the Poor, St. Jude's, all these pretty, pretty, shiny, shiny things that ask for all of your money, make you give tens of thousands of dollars. They do clubs with kids. They have kids do banquets. They have clubs in schools. They just go everywhere into the community. They do workout classes. They have everything, and people don't even know it's associated with the UN. They go of every kind. And so, like in India, there's supposed to be like upwards of like 25 million of these, like little NGOs everywhere. And none of them report their financial documents. And when they finally get looked into, less than 10% of their earnings are actually going to the poor. Just like the Clinton Foundation, exactly like the Clinton Foundation, who, by the way, always worked with 174 countries. That's the UN. So it's very, very interesting, like how it's all intertwined, like all the money at the top is intertwined. But the point is that gives us a hint. Like then the NGOs go out and then they spread the money, and then ICLEI will go into governments, and they'll go to your government officials, which is why I say get involved in your local governments, get involved with your mayor, get involved with they love going into city councils. That's how they get those micro apartments built. That's how they make sure like single family homes don't get built anymore, and how they make sure wildlife preserves get built. Like we've got enough wildlife preserves, and every single wildlife preserve was built by the UN, right? In order to create a Hunger Games type life. Hunger Games, that's why you see all those high-speed trains being built. In California, we were like, why the heck did Jerry Brown just sign into being a high-speed train? We didn't ask for it. We didn't vote on it. We don't have the money for it. We were already bankrupt. Why were they doing that? Yep, because of UN. The rich want these high-speed trains to go from city to city, while we just kind of die off. But we can leave. Let's find out how. So, number 1, vote out their laws. So how do you vote out their laws? Well, it's their law easily. It has that label climate change on it. It's clean energy, organic, all that stuff, organic, clean energy, environment, like you've already seen all the documentaries on organic, finding out that it's actually not, in fact, it's dirtier than the real stuff. Like, it's pure Agenda 21, like going back to the dirt, all the stuff that used to protect humans, they removed it all. And so you get sicker on it, and they charge more for it. It helps the 1%, and it makes us sicker, straight up. And so anything that's environmental, a gas tax, any kind of like clean energy tax, anything that's green or environmental or global energy or global environment or anything that has to do with the environment or clean energy or look up the Sustainable Development Goals, anything that's along that, or like, equal this or equal that or whatever. It's so easy to see now. Like, you can literally see all these tweets by politicians. I can go down Nancy Pelosi's tweets or Bernie Sanders' tweets, and I can actually tag the UN Sustainable Development Goals to every single one, because the UN is the left. It's so directly, like, they write the script. I used to always say there's a script that's being written, there's a script that's being written, and we now know who's writing it, and they work very hard to develop it at these climate change conferences. That's why they have so many negotiations, because it takes 174 countries to agree on what they're going to be tweeting for the next year, to agree that, we're going to be focusing on transgender this year, we're going to be focusing on climate change this year. But you'll notice on those 17 things, climate change is 13th. Well, if they were all climate change conferences, why is it 13th? So it's just a pretty shiny label. And if you notice, when Tucker Carlson went after environmentalism, they were all after him on the UN Migration Compact. They were all after him. And so he was like, you know what? I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of you. And by the way, illegal immigration hurts the environment. And you don't seem to care. And I was like he hit sustainable development. And it just went silent. And people were like, why? And I was like, because he touched the label. He said, he actually said, I know that without this label, if they find out that you actually couldn't give a crap about climate change, the whole Nazi agenda will be exposed. Like, you want me to keep talking? I'll keep talking. That's once the mask comes off, it's over for them. It's over for them. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to rip the mask off. So vote out their laws. So when a law comes your way, say no on it. And then when you have politicians in office, start undoing the laws. Start all of our permits and everything have something to do. There is a reason that you can't do things on your land. You have to get a permit from the government. That's all them. Like, you have to take public good over what you get to do with your land. If it's really your land, they wouldn't be able to do anything on it. Like, you should be able to do whatever you want on your land. You shouldn't have to get a permit from somebody else to tell you, well, okay, you're doing public good by doing this on your land, right? So so it is just one of those things where that's happening in DC right now. We're finding out what I'm learning, why Donald Trump, like, I've really become a huge admirer. Like, now I'm sold on the Trump. Like, I can't, I have been watching what he's doing now, and I'm watching him cut off every single one of the UN's legs. He just made Obamacare unconstitutional. He took their SDG 3, their first thing that comes. Reagan said, in every society, socialism begins with health care. That's what they started with the law. That was the first law they put in, and he undid it. And then his budget proposes like an 80% cut in energy, in clean energy. And I'm like, that's another hit. And all of it goes to their contractors. And just on and on and on. He's just hacking away at them. So, and I'm like, look at his agenda. Like, look at Trump's agenda. It's literally like, we don't want to be a socialist regime underneath the UN. We want to be an independent nation. We want to write our own laws. We don't serve you. Now, if you want to know why, hold on. All right, I forgot what I was going to say, so I apologize if it was a really good point. So, but it's proof, and the reason they are not reporting any of it is they don't want you to know that democracy works. Like, they really don't want, that's what the whole point of the Russia story is. The whole point of the Russia story is to distract you from the fact that, democracy works, and all this UN stuff can be undone. But it does. You can vote in people in your state, in your town, in your city to undo all of the things they bought before. Now, why are migrants coming in? That's what I was saying. Everyone's been saying, oh, the UN wants migrants into the nation for the richest servants. No, the rich doesn't need 11 million servants. This is why. This is their ultimate agenda. And I just figured this out because of an amazing researcher. And she just nailed it. She's given me 2 pieces of research that enabled me to do the last video. And then she gave me this one, and I was like, bow down. And what it is that if you look at Sweden, if you really take a look at Sweden, Sweden's owned by the UN now. There it is clear. Even Volvo is doing Volvo 2020 now. It's Vision 2020 Volvo. And every time Sweden has a meeting of their chemical companies, it's now the United Nations and Sweden's government and the chemical companies meeting. Now, every time something happens at Sweden, it's Sweden and the UN. And now the UN is speaking for Sweden when it comes to the vote on Brexit. Everyone wondered why all the migrants headed past all the other countries and went straight for Sweden. Did you know in 2010 they said that Sweden was headed to be a third world country already from migration? Because they have the wealth, like they give out the most in welfare benefits. And so they just hit them hard with migrants and sent all of them to Sweden. They skipped all the other countries. Listen to the numbers that the other countries actually took in. Sweden took in by far the most. They took in a crap ton to the point that there's 191 men to every single woman. That's it. You can do whatever you need to do, baby. Oh, I thought you asked a question. Okay. So, that's how many people they import. Like, that's how much it tipped the scales in Sweden. And that's how many on the welfare. And boom, it crashed. And what happens when a government crashes? The World Bank has to step in. And who is the World Bank? The UN. The UN is the World Bank. Look at every World Bank order and you'll see that it's asking for sustainable development. I looked up China and its urbanization. All the urbanization orders in the world are all from the UN. The UN ordered urbanization, even though it created mass poverty. Look it up. In 10 years, they put 1 billion people. In 10 years of Agenda 21, they put 1 billion people into slums. And the UN said, oh, we need to reverse this policy if we want to end poverty, their number one goal. And what did they do? They turned around and ordered China to move 250 million people to the cities for sustainable development. For climate change. And then the rich went and took all their land and started developing it for themselves. While the migrants lived in slums, there are now slums all throughout China. But who ordered it for sustainable development? That would be the World Bank. What are all these migrants for? They are to literally break the welfare systems and break the governments down so that, look at all the 17 sustainable goals. They are all huge drains on the governments. The UN doesn't pay for it. The UN makes the government policy and then tells all the countries to pay for it. That'll break their banks. And then their banks break. And the UN World Bank steps in and they have a world government for real. With real control. I think they already own Greece. Because we haven't heard about Greece in a while. I think they own Greece. And now they own Sweden. But they're not going to own us. Because we already knew it was wrong. We already knew our budget couldn't handle it. But that's why you hear Bernie Sanders constantly saying, we need Medicare for all. We need to pay for college for all. And every time someone says, how are you going to pay for it? He literally says, I don't know. He just knows we need it. because our budget needs to fall. It needs to crack for the UN World Bank. It just has to happen because a socialist system is just ready and raiding behind him the UN to rule us all. And that's a lesson for the rest of you countries out there. All those goals they have of universal health care are just designed to crack your systems and bring socialism in and slums. They're not compassionate. So how to get out? Vote out their laws, the green laws, and all of the healthcare, like all the universal, federal aid, all those compassion things, or at least decrease the funding for them. 2, vote out their politicians. If they support climate change policies, they work for the UN. There are some politicians out there that are like, they're this or that, or are like, I'm okay with climate change, but they don't like say the policies, or they're not like, you can tell the difference. Like some don't really care about climate change, but know the 17 the SDGs. Know the 17 SDGs of Agenda 30, and you will know there's a big difference between them. And our Clean the GOP people none of them were Agenda 2030. You can tell. Number 3, the media isn't the law. I found it. Remember how I said they used TV and then all of a sudden we changed and wanted communism? Man, I found it. The UN holds governance awards for the media around the world. They use a thing called internews.com. And they use it to spread their goals out throughout the world. And to the media, they use young eco-socialists in the media. And then they hand out governance awards for partnership in governing. They govern through the media. But that's the point. It's all they have. They govern us through the media by yelling. They don't have any actual power. So number 4 is stop living under their laws and under our own. For example, PC, political correctness, the thing created by Communist China and created by Soviet Union. PC, that was just suddenly brought upon us out of nowhere. No, that literally started in 1992 by Agenda 21. Literally. They all say it started in Stanford. Nope. It started at the UN. We have it in writing. And it's a socialist regime, and we know it. But how is it interacted and set as law? Through the media. Telling us shame, shame, shame. Well, that's their little law enforcement. Well, all they get to do is yell through our phones. That's it. We don't go to jail. Our law is free speech. So, bye. One of the things I found out that they made a law? Let me shock you. Oh, what's that? I just woke up, Tiberius. Sorry, Tiberius. What's that? Oh, are you freaking out? Are you freaking out because it's against the law to wear fur in this country? Or are you freaking out because it was made a law by the media, aka the UN? Would you like to know all those movies and all those videos you saw against fur? Yeah, I looked into it after I learned out about the UN and the way they do things and through the media. And I was like, you know what? I have a question, because I started paying attention to all the things I'm scared to do, which means I was bullied into it, which means it's not the law that we voted on as a democracy. It's just something we were bullied into by some fictional government that doesn't actually have any control over us, that just likes to yell and wishes they had control. But they don't. They have nothing. So, what did they lie about with fur that we used to wear all the time? Well, what did they say in the UN? The UN said it's not social justice for individuals to accumulate wealth, except that you should see their little gatherings at the Nobel Peace Prize dinners that look exactly like the Nazi Christmas parties and exactly like the progressives of the 1914s. Gee, all the parties are decorated exactly the same, and the tables are lined up exactly the same, and the tables are decorated exactly the same. Isn't it interesting how the progressives and Nazi Germany and the Nobel laureates all have the same exact formations? Huh, I think I'll listen to our law that we voted on ourselves. And one of the things I learned about our law is that it is okay to accumulate wealth and look wealthy. And fur is one of the ways we do that. And if you're freaking out, I just want to ask you something. Do we wear leather? Do we wear leather purses? Yeah, we do. There ain't no difference. Number 2, all those scary things that Janice Dickinson had us watch. I had a hunch about something, so I checked it out. Because I was like, man, that really scared me half to death. That really scared me. And then I realized I've been up to Alaska, and I've seen the furriers there. And I talked to them, and I was like, wait a minute. Yeah, they made tape of the worst furriers in the corner of the world. And I started paying attention. And if you read those articles, they say the furriers in China kill animals when they're alive, skin them alive. Yeah, China also amputates the livers, heart, everything out of people while they're still breathing and talking and sells them off to the world. Of course China kills animals when they're alive and skins them alive or whatever and things like that. That's China. They are the most horrific people in the world. They still have concentration camps. Of course they do sick and twisted things. Why wouldn't the UN want Americans and the rest of the world wearing fur? Number 1, they want us to get used to being without wealth. They don't want us to think we're hoity-toity. They want us to think it's a social injustice to ever have wealth. So how dare we look wealthy? Number 1. Number 2, didn't we all start wearing jeans? Remember when black pants started becoming a bad thing and start wearing jewelry started becoming a bad thing? We started wearing jeans. Remember when men stopped wearing business suits to the office and they all started wearing slackers clothes and everything like that? Do you remember why they said that? So we wouldn't notice when we started losing our wealth and the gap went like this. Gosh darn, when we couldn't afford our furs anymore, we'd start noticing. Ever think about that? Screw them. I'm living under their other laws, the ones we voted in. I'm going against them. I'm not living under the UN anymore, and you'd be amazed at how much you live under the UN. You'd be amazed. They put celebrities on the sidewalk, and they have PETA throw PETA. NGO. Right up to the UN. Stop funding them. And they have them throw a thing on, so that makes you think you're going to get pain thrown on you. You know what happens when I wear a fur out, which is still hard for me to do? It's hard for me to wear fake fur out. Oh my gosh. I go out there and wear it, and you know what happens? Even in a little rural city, I get compliments the house. People love it. People want to be wealthy again. They want to look good again. And American trappers and furriers are some of the best in the world because we have humane practices. We are an amazing, amazing society. We are industrialized. And gosh darn it, does it make sense that they'd ever take fur and bash it on a rock? Wouldn't that ruin the fur? And the other reason I like fur, let me tell you why. You know the first time I started questioning fur was when my husband wanted me to watch Great America. Have you seen what animals do to each other's fur? You just watch Great America a little bit. And I was like, yeah, that's what happens to the fur if I leave it out there. I would rather give it glory and do it honor and let it live forever in beauty. You gotta be joking, letting it be torn up, have its butt be screwed up, and you should see the things that happen to animals out there. And I'm like, I'm supposed to let, yeah. Indians did it, Native Americans did it, you know what I mean? And they do it, the rich do it, they just don't want us doing it. They don't want us getting hoity-toity and thinking we're above our station. But they do it. Look at their little NGO dinners. Look at how just darn hoity-toity they get. So the media is not the law. Buy made in the USA. It's so much freaking cheaper anyway. But when you buy made from China and even any other communist country, you are funding the UN. When Venezuela went down, China funded it, and the World Bank funds China. They fund China. It is just the way it goes. Oh, so it's even more, and it's so much cheaper, or buy locally. But my woman, she brought up a cat box that we had gotten, and I thought it was broken, and she's like, "Oh no, it's right here." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And I was like, "Yeah," I was like, "I bought that before I knew about made in China, right?" I said, "Except that it was so much cheaper." I was like, "It's so cheap. It's like $7 for the whole entire, cat box and lid, and it's made so good." And I was like, "Actually, now that I think about it, it's so cheap and it's made so well. You know what? I wonder if it's made in America." And she looked on, she's like, "Yeah, made in the USA. Cheapest cat box they ever bought. Best made. All the others are like $80 to get a closed lid. Frickin', you gotta be joking." All right, my battery's running low. All right, stop living out of there. May have made it buy vintage luxury good. It's what the celebrities do anyway. Do I look good in this? I think I do. You don't have to buy fur, but just wonder if you're doing it because you're scared. Because the media told you, not because of anything we decided. You eat meat, you wear leather, the people who say, you've got to be kidding me. And they don't treat humans very well, the people that do these things. It is absolutely incredible. They all say these things and then they go out from China. They absolutely do all this work with China, socialist country, that are harvesting organs. Like, really? You really care? And the things they're doing to animals in China? So I don't really want to hear it. The hypocrisy. And their funding. Don't fund the NGOs. Nearly every charity club and churches. So many churches actually end up being eco-activists or tied to the UN in some way. So, and then I said, and finally learn their SDGs. That stands for Sustainable Development Goals, but they call them SDGs. Number 3 was Obamacare, which was just ruled unconstitutional because of people who lived out the ideas above. But in other countries, it's crushing their economies like South Africa and Greece. That makes them rely on the World Bank, which is the UN. Now go and be free. Enjoy living exactly as you want. They have no strings unless you let them. It's your choice. XO. Love you guys. Merry Christmas. Moi. So, just remember, the press is their law enforcement. And the worst they can do is yell. And they lie. They lie. Cheryl Atkinson, when she talks about, Cheryl Atkinson goes on and on about how all the astroturfing is 501c3s. That's all NGOs. And she's like, and they make up stuff. It's all fake news. It's just the media. It's how they govern. And they hand out governance awards for it. Well, you don't have to listen to the news anymore. And that's why I'm so proud of Tucker Carlson for going out there and saying, I'm not intimidated. And the UN Compact says, it is illegal to speak about immigration. And so he went out and he's like, I'm not intimidated. And he spoke about illegal immigration. He spoke about illegal immigration. And then he said, and by the way, it hurts the environment. Your scientists used to do reports on that. They don't anymore. It's interesting that you don't care about the environment anymore. I thought you did. Why does the left hate the environment now? And I was like, that's bravery, because he knows it's Nazism. And he faced it head on the very medium they use to govern. And the thing is that I know that all of us around the world have that kind of heart. Because we hate what they did to the world. And we have a choice. And we are not going to let it get us. I love you guys so much. Run for office. Get involved. Hand out flyers. Share what you can. But make sure you tell people to start taking a look at climate change conferences. Get their hands on the SDGs before they start erasing. Before they start downloading stuff. Before they start erasing it. Because once they think you're onto them, download all the press releases, all the PDFs for every climate change conference and the things they talk about in between their negotiations. Because it sure ain't climate change they're talking about. It's talking about ruling the world. And you will be amazed at what you find. And by the way, a lot of my research I find when I do images. When I research this, I don't do the links. I do images nowadays. I search for eco-socialism and I look up Google Images. That's how I find everything. Yeah, so I've really changed that. I've changed to looking at the images, like Agenda 2030, and I look at the images, and then I find science through that, and then I click through those links. So that might help you a lot, like while they still have stuff up. You can find amazing things. Don't look at the links. They've got the links locked down, but they don't have images locked down yet. So get on it while you can. I love you guys so much, and go out and inform people, or when Bernie Sanders tweets, you can answer and just say, this is climate change goal this. Why are you working for the UN and not the world? It's so interesting now when we see things and they say, you know, Hollywood's releasing Men in Black International Edition. We know what that is now. It's not China, it's the UN. You know, they may be funding it through China, but it's the UN. It's so much easier now. UN, National Socialista Regime. But unless they own our government, they don't own us. And we're going to prevent that. No more socialist policies, no more universal health care. No more universal programs. We're going to pull ourselves up on our own, and we're going to beat it because we know what's on the other end, and it means that we don't exist anymore, and we certainly plan on existing, and not with them. Love you guys so much. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Merry New Year. Happy Hanukkah, and all of it. Mwah! You guys are amazing. This is the first time I've worn it, actually. So, because I'm too freaking scared. So I'm going to really work on that. Buying it was my challenge. And so I will work on that together. Love you guys. Bye. Oh, watch the videos here.